Most people were not raised to question the dream. They were raised to chase it, work hard, make good choices, get an education, buy a home, build something better than the life you came from. That promise carried families through night shifts, second jobs, long commutes, skipped meals, quiet sacrifices, and years nobody ever saw. So this is not about mocking the dream. Wanting safety is not foolish. Wanting ownership is not greed. Wanting something to leave behind is human. The problem is not the dream. The problem is what the dream became. At some point, the American dream stopped being only a source of hope. It became a measuring system: the house, the degree, the job title, the neighborhood, the savings account. All of it became evidence. Evidence that a person had discipline. Evidence that a person made the right choices. Evidence that a person deserved the life they built. And once success becomes proof of character, struggle starts to look like a personal defect. That is where the lie begins. Not in the desire to rise, in the belief that everyone was given the same access. The phrase American Dream became widely known in 1931 when historian James Truslow Adams used it in The Epic of America. He described it as a dream of a land where life could be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity tied to ability and achievement. But the timing matters. 1931 was not a comfortable year. America was in the Great Depression. Banks were failing. Jobs were disappearing. Families were losing homes, savings, and faith in the future. The country needed a story strong enough to survive collapse. At its best, the dream spoke to dignity. It said a person should not be permanently trapped by the condition they were born into. But over time, the dream became easier to sell through images: a clean house, a good school, a stable job, a safe street, a family with room to breathe. And images can do something dangerous. They can turn hope into accusation. To understand the dream, start with the house. Because in America, the house was never just a place to live. It was a machine for transferring advantage. A home could rise in value. That value could become equity. Equity could help pay for college, survive an emergency, start a business, support retirement, or become inheritance. So the real question was never just who wanted a home. The real question was who could get one under fair conditions. For much of the 20th century, housing opportunity was shaped by segregation, lending practices, neighborhood ratings, appraisal systems, and public policy. Some families were helped into ownership. Others were steered away from it, priced out of it, or locked into neighborhoods where investment had already been restricted. Then, the damage was treated as evidence. That is how a system hides. It helps create the condition, then points at the condition as proof. One family pays a mortgage for 30 years and builds an asset. Another family pays rent for 30 years and has proof that they paid, but nothing that can be passed forward. Both families may have worked hard. Both may have sacrificed. Both may have believed in the same dream. But one family's payments became a foundation for the next generation. The other family's payments helped them survive the present. That difference does not stay in the past. It follows children. It follows schools. It follows stress. It follows what kind of risk a person can afford to take later. And that is the part the dream usually edits out. It shows the house. It does not always show the door that opened first. Education is where America tells people the race begins again. A child walks into a classroom, and the country pretends the past has been left outside the door. But the past comes in with them. It comes in through sleep, through nutrition, through stress, through internet access, through the parent who has time to help and the parent too exhausted to read another form, through the counselor who knows the college process, and the counselor responsible for too many students to guide anyone well. Two children can have the same intelligence and still be trained by two different realities. One learns early that institutions can be navigated. The other learns that every door has a hidden rule. That is why the exceptional success story is so useful to the mythology. The student who makes it through becomes proof that the system works. The difficulty of the path disappears from the picture. College deepens the illusion. The same degree can look identical in a graduation photo and carry two completely different futures. One graduate leaves with family support, professional contacts, and debt that can be managed. Another leaves with the same credential, but a financial weight that delays moving out, saving, buying a home, starting a business, or choosing meaningful work over immediate survival. The diploma says both students crossed the stage. It does not show what each one had to carry afterward. That is one of the quiet tricks of the dream. It turns the finish line into a photograph, then hides the debt, the pressure, the family obligations, and the years of delayed life standing just outside the frame. Work carries the next contradiction. Before sunrise, the American dream is already moving. Store lights come on, delivery trucks back into loading docks, buses fill up, parents leave home before their children are awake. People clock in while their bodies are still carrying yesterday. This country is full of people who are working hard. That is not the missing ingredient. The question is whether the work creates enough room to build. For many families, the paycheck does not arrive as possibility. It arrives already claimed. Rent takes its part. Food takes its part. Gas, insurance, medicine, repairs, childcare, old balances. By the time the money reaches the account, the future has already been divided up. This is where work becomes crisis management. It keeps life from collapsing, but it does not always create space to move forward. That is different from laziness. That is different from lack of ambition. That is a person running on a treadmill while being told the road is open. And debt makes the pressure harder to see because debt rarely enters a life wearing a warning label. It usually arrives as a solution. A student signs papers because education is supposed to be the way forward. A parent uses a credit card because the car has to be fixed before Monday. A worker takes a loan because transportation is required to keep the job. A family receives a medical bill from a crisis they did not choose. On paper, these look like individual decisions. In real life, they often reveal how little margin people had. Debt does not only reduce a bank balance, it changes time. It delays when someone can move, when they can save, when they can leave a bad job, when they can start over, when they can take a chance on something better. One bad month can keep charging interest long after the emergency is over. The original problem passes. The cost keeps moving through the future. That is why debt carries shame. People often treat it like proof they failed, even when it came from surviving conditions that gave them no cushion. Sometimes debt comes from bad choices. That is real. But sometimes debt comes from having no backup in a society where almost every emergency has a price. And underneath all of it is the thing America talks about carefully: inheritance. Inheritance is usually discussed as money, but money is only part of it. People inherit neighborhoods, school districts, advice, habits, family reputation, credit knowledge, professional networks, emergency support, examples of how to speak in rooms where decisions get made. They also inherit a relationship to risk. Starting a business feels different when failure does not mean losing everything. Moving to another city feels different when there is somewhere to return. Taking a low-paid opportunity feels different when survival is not waiting at the front door. Some people inherit a net, others inherit a warning. Over time, those experiences shape how people move through banks, schools, interviews, offices, and neighborhoods. They influence what people ask for, what they expect, what they believe they are allowed to become. This is the part of the American dream that cannot be explained by a simple speech about effort. Effort matters. Discipline matters. Choices matter. But effort has a different cost depending on the conditions around it. That does not erase responsibility. It places responsibility more accurately. Some responsibility belongs to individual choices. Some belongs to family patterns. Some belongs to community conditions. Some belongs to systems built long before the individual arrived. That is not an excuse. It is a more honest map. By adulthood, the dream is no longer just something people hear in politics, commercials, and graduation speeches. It becomes part of how they measure their lives. You can see it in the person who avoids opening a bill because the number feels like judgment. You can see it in the parent who gave everything and still wonders why they could not leave more behind. You can see it in the worker who is exhausted but feels guilty sitting still. You can see it in the young adult looking at rent, tuition, wages, and home prices, wondering why the future feels delayed before it has even started. That is the psychological force of the dream. It does not only describe success, it teaches people how to interpret struggle. And when the explanation is too simple, the shame becomes heavier than it should be. That shame is useful. A person blaming themselves is less likely to question the structure around them. They ask, "What is wrong with me?" before they ask, "Who benefits from this being normal?" That does not mean every failure is systemic. That does not mean every outcome is unfair. But it does mean the old explanation is too small. The American dream should not be thrown away simply because people wanted better lives. The desire for a home, peace, safety, family, ownership, and stability is not the problem. The mythology around the dream is the problem, because mythology does not just inspire people, it can also discipline them. It can teach people to carry shame that does not belong only to them. A more honest dream would still value discipline, but it would stop treating outcomes as pure evidence of character. It would still value work, but it would ask whether work leads to dignity and stability. It would still encourage education, but it would question why opportunity depends so heavily on zip code, family wealth, debt, and access to guidance. It would still respect ownership, but it would remember who was historically blocked from building it. That is where sober hope begins, not in pretending the system is fair, not in giving up because it is not. Hope becomes useful when it is attached to reality. A person can take responsibility for their life without accepting shame that does not belong to them. They can work, plan, learn, build, and make better choices while still understanding that the path was never equally designed. The lie hidden inside the American dream was not that people wanted better lives. The lie was that everyone had the same access to make that dream real. Once that becomes clear, the dream does not have to disappear. It has to become honest. Less mythology, less shame, less pretending that history has no effect on the present. The goal is not to stop trying. The goal is to stop confusing effort with equal access. Because the most dangerous myth is not the one that tells people to build. It is the one that teaches them to blame themselves for doors that were never opened evenly. The American dream was never just about effort. It was about access, and access has a history.
Goes with